right, so diving deep into the world of Cane Corsos, huh? This should be interesting. We're looking at their potential for military work, and we've got a whole stack of articles here to dig into.
Sounds intriguing.
What I'm really curious about is these dogs, they definitely have the look, big, strong, imposing. It makes you wonder, do Cane Corsos actually have what it takes to serve in the military?
It's a question a lot of people asked for good reason. I mean, you see a cane corso and you can't help but think military material. But the reality is we don't often see them in those roles.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. We know breeds like, say, Belgian Malinois, German Shepherds, they're kind of the usual suspects when you think military dogs.
Hmm.
What is it about those breeds that makes them such a good fit?
Well, you have to consider the demands of the job, right? Tracking, explosive detection, patrol. These tasks require a very specific set of
I
traits.
can imagine.
We're talking high energy, incredibly strong sense of smell, and of course, trainability. Agility and speed are key too, and you can't forget about drive. A strong work ethic, unwavering loyalty, and yeah, even a degree of fierceness when it's necessary. And the breeds we mentioned, they're often specifically bred for these qualities, sometimes even over generations.
Makes sense. So are you saying those traits are completely absent in Cane Corsos?
Not at all. Cane Corsos are intelligent, no doubt about that, and they can definitely be trained. But it's important to consider their historical breeding.
Okay, so what were they originally bred for?
Primarily as guardians, protecting property, protecting their families. That instinct is still very much a part of who they are today, which translates into loyalty and protectiveness. But those qualities don't necessarily translate to, say, the intense drive and focus needed for sniffing out explosives in a war zone.
So there's more to it than just general intelligence or trainability. It's fascinating how much their breeding plays a role.
Exactly. Think about scent discrimination, for example. Military dogs, especially those trained for bomb detection, undergo incredibly specialized training. We're talking about isolating specific scents, even in environments that are just a symphony of smells.
Wow.
That level of focus, that discrimination, it often comes from generations of breeding, combined with, as I said, very rigorous training.
Okay, so maybe sniffing out landmines isn't really their thing. But what about other roles? Could a Cane Corso cut it as a guard dog, for example? With their size and strength,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to mess with one.
Now there's an idea. You're tapping into something important, and that's playing to a breed's strengths. Cane Corsos, they may not be ideally suited for, storming a building, but those qualities you mentioned, their size, their strength, their natural protectiveness, those could be incredibly valuable in roles like guarding or patrolling.
So even if they're not on the front lines, they could still have a place, just in a different capacity.
Precisely. And this is where training and socialization become absolutely paramount. You can't just assume a dog's natural instincts will be enough, especially in a high-stakes environment like the military.
Right, it's a lot more than just barking at a stranger in the night.
Exactly. You need controlled, reliable responses to commands, especially in those pressure cooker situations.
Makes sense.
And that takes time, dedication, a deep understanding of the dog's individual temperament. It's a big responsibility, and it highlights the importance of responsible breeding and training practices.
It sounds like while we may not see a Cane Corso, leading a raid anytime soon, their skills could definitely be valuable in other areas. And speaking of other areas, our listener also sent in some information about an organization called Corsos for Heroes. They're doing some interesting work training Cane Corsos, but for a different kind of service.
Courses for heroes, yeah. Now, that's a fantastic example of recognizing a breed's unique strengths and putting them to good use. What have you learned about them?
Well, from what I've gathered, they're training Cane Corsos to work with veterans and first responders. So, not directly in the military, but it seems like a similar kind of dedication and partnership is required.
Absolutely. These dogs, they go through rigorous training to become true partners and companions. And what's fascinating is how they're often trained for tasks that are specifically tailored to the unique needs of their handlers.
Now, that makes me really curious. Can you give us an example of what that kind of specialized training might look like?
Of course. Imagine a Cane Corso trained to recognize the signs of a panic attack in their handler, say a veteran struggling with PTSD. The dog might gently nudge them, maybe guide them to a safe space, or even fetch medication.
Wow, that's amazing. They're like free guardian angels, completely in tune with their humans' needs.
That's a great way to put it. And it highlights how, even within the realm of service work, there are so many different paths a dog can take, each requiring its own set of skills and, of course, specialized training.
It really makes you appreciate the incredible versatility of dogs. But let's dive a little deeper into that training aspect.
Mhm.
What does it actually entail for a cane corso to become one of these heroes?
Well, it all starts with building that bond, that really strong connection between the dog and their handler. We're talking about a deep trust and understanding, that kind of partnership you just don't find everywhere.
Right, because when things get tough, when those stressful situations arise, that bond is crucial for them to work effectively as a team.
Exactly. And for a Cane Corso partnered with a veteran, that bond, that understanding, it can make all the difference. We're talking about a dog that's not just a pet, but a partner, a confidant, a source of unwavering support.
That's incredible. So how do they actually train a cane corso to recognize and respond to things like, say, anxiety or a panic attack? I mean, that just seems like it would take a whole lot of very specialized training.
Oh, absolutely. It's not something that happens overnight. These dogs, they go through months, sometimes even years of specialized training, and it's all tailored to the needs of their future handler.
Years. Wow. Okay, so we're talking about a serious commitment here. What are some of the key things that they focus on during that training?
One of the most crucial aspects is teaching the dog to read their handler's body language. Because dogs, they're incredibly perceptive. They
Yeah.
pick up on these subtle cues, little things that what humans often miss entirely.
Like a change in breathing, muscle tension maybe?
Exactly. So a cane corso training for this kind of work, they'll learn to recognize those subtle shifts in their handler that might indicate anxiety, agitation, that sort of thing. And once they recognize those signs, that's when the real training kicks in because they have to learn how to respond in a way that provides comfort and support.
So what does that look like in practice? Does the dog like try to distract the handler or I don't know, alert someone else?
It really depends on the dog and their handler's specific needs. Some dogs, they might gently nudge their handler, kind of encouraging them to move away from whatever's causing the stress. Others might offer physical contact, maybe leaning against their human, providing that sense of grounding, security.
Wow, it's incredible. It's like they instinctively know how to provide the exact type of support needed. Do they ever train them to like fetch medication or alert others if there's an emergency?
Absolutely. In some cases, the training goes even further. Some dogs might learn to retrieve medication, while others are trained to activate an emergency response system if their handler experiences a medical crisis.
Wow, they really do become lifelines for their handlers. It's just amazing how adaptable dogs can be, especially a breed as powerful as a Cane Corso.
It really speaks volumes about their intelligence and how trainable they are, but it also highlights the trainers who work with them. These trainers, they're not just teaching commands, they're shaping behaviors, building trust, cultivating this incredible bond.
It's a team effort, that's for sure.
Hmm.
It takes a special kind of dog, special kind of handler, and definitely a very special kind of trainer.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And speaking of teams, let's maybe shift gears a bit here and talk about the training process for more traditional military dogs, the ones we often see, working alongside soldiers in the field.
Right, so we're talking about like the Malinois, German Shepherds, those guys, the ones trained for tasks like explosive detection, patrol, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And while the end goal is obviously very different, the foundation of training a military dog, it shares some similarities with what we've been discussing. It all starts with selecting dogs who possess the right temperament, the drive, the aptitude for the job.
So not every dog, even within those breeds, is cut out for military work.
Precisely. It takes a very specific blend of intelligence, courage, and that willingness to please, a desire to work that not all dogs have, even within those breeds. And once they've identified a potential candidate, that's when the real training begins.
And I imagine that training is, well, incredibly intense.
Intense is an understatement. We're talking about years of specialized training, often starting when they're just puppies. These dogs, they learn everything from basic obedience commands to really complex tactical maneuvers. They're trained to work seamlessly with their handlers, often in, well, let's just say, high-pressure situations.
Like navigating a battlefield, apprehending a suspect, those kinds of high-pressure situations.
Exactly. They need to remain focused, responsive, even when surrounded by distractions, potential threats, you name it.
Yeah, that's a little different than what I need to train my Labrador to do. He's happy chasing squirrels in the park.
Well, there aren't usually any squirrels allowed on a military operation, but all jokes aside, the level of precision and discipline required of a military dog is really quite astounding. They are remarkable animals.
Absolutely. So how do they go from playful little puppies to these highly skilled, incredibly disciplined members of a military unit? What does that training actually look like?
Well, it's quite a process. It usually starts with, basic obedience.
Sit, stay, heel, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But it goes way beyond that, of course. These dogs, they learn to respond to commands flawlessly, even in the middle of, well, chaos, basically. They're also trained in things like agility, scent detection, even apprehension technique.
Apprehension technique. So we're
Yep.
talking about actually apprehending a suspect.
You got it. These dogs are trained to basically detain a suspect until their handler can move in, and they're taught to do it in a way that minimizes risk, both to themselves and to others.
It sounds incredibly intense. You got these powerful dogs bred for generations for specific tasks, and then they go through this rigorous training regimen. It really makes you appreciate the skill and dedication of both the dogs and their handlers.
Absolutely. It really speaks to what can be accomplished with teamwork, trust, and a deep understanding of what these dogs are capable of.
It's clear that not every dog is cut out for this type of work, just like not every Cane Corso is destined to be a military dog.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing is it's more about finding the right fit, the right role for the right dog, regardless of breed.
You hit the nail on the head. Each breed, each individual dog even, has its own set of strengths, talents, things they naturally excel at. And it's our job as humans to nurture those talents and make sure these amazing animals get the opportunity to really shine.
So whether it's a German Shepherd sniffing out danger on a battlefield or a Cane Corso providing unwavering support to a veteran, it's all about harnessing the power of that human-animal bond.
Precisely. And that bond, that partnership, is what makes these stories so compelling. We see these dogs, often stereotyped or misunderstood, rising to the occasion, exceeding expectations, even saving lives.
It's truly inspiring. So for our listener out there who's been fascinated by the potential of Cane Corsos, what would you say is the key takeaway here?
I think the biggest thing is to challenge assumptions. We can't let our preconceived notions limit what a particular breed can achieve.
Just because we might not see a Cane Corso leading a SWAT team doesn't mean they don't have amazing potential in other areas.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe as we learn even more about canine behavior and training, those roles will continue to evolve, expand. There's always more to discover.
What a fantastic point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. You've given us, well, me and our listeners, a lot to think about.
It was my pleasure. Always a joy to talk about the incredible world of dogs.